Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway. I'm glad you joined me for this particular message. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the concept of remembering those who have gone before. And in the churches I serve, we've had several people die this past year, and we miss them deeply. And we understand that feeling as Christians of losing those we care about and those we love. I thought about that in relationship to the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews is one of the books that I read very early in my Christian faith when I was a very young teenager. I have since that point been very struck by the book of Hebrews each and every time I read through it. The book of Hebrews is fascinating to me. When I was a kid, I naturally took the idea that the Apostle Paul wrote it because that's what all the commentaries and all the people were talking about. But as I got older and as I looked at the book and compared it with Paul's other writings in the New Testament, it becomes pretty clear that it's not written by the Apostle Paul. And in fact, many ancient writers did not believe the Apostle Paul had written the book of Hebrews. There was a question as to who had written it, but they were not very confident that Paul had written it. And as a result of that, I believe that it was written by an associate of the Apostle Paul, because the writer mentions Timothy and mentions other people that we are acquainted with from Paul's writings. So we know that he was an acquaintance or a person who worked with the Apostle Paul, but his writing style is very different than Paul's, and his way of approaching the issue of spiritual growth and development is quite different. In fact, as I read through the book of Hebrews quite a few years ago now, I have now come to the conclusion that it was actually written after the Neronian persecution. And I am even more convinced that it was probably written in the year and a half between the death of Nero and the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, because the writer talks as if the temple still exists in Jerusalem in Hebrews. So it needs to be placed before that incident, but it also has a flavor of many of the Christian leaders being in jail and having been imprisoned recently. And we know that after Nero's death, many of the Christian prisoners were simply released because the Roman government was so involved in a civil war that was just gulping up all of the political air that was in the Roman world. And so they really didn't have time to deal with the Christian issue. And so most, and if not all, of the Christians who were still imprisoned were released simply because the Roman government didn't want to have to deal with it in the midst of the crisis that they were facing after the death of Nero. So that's why I tend to place this book in that year and a half, just after the death or suicide of Nero, and during the civil war that ensued after that. So it's kind of an interesting time frame. Things have changed dramatically. Most of the early leaders of the church, like Paul and Barnabas and Peter, have died during the persecution. They are no longer on the scene. And you have other apostles that are possibly still alive, like Matthew or Thomas, and we know John was still alive, but those are very few in number, and they are getting elderly, and it is at the point where there is a major need of transition. But they feel like their anchor point has gone, that mooring line that they had to the apostles and to the early leaders, the people that had seen Jesus face to face, is being lost very quickly in the Christian community. And their relationship with the Jewish people has been has been severed or broken, and the backstop of Judaistic theology and doctrine has been lost to the church as a result of the Jewish war that is raging in Judea and Palestine at this very time. And the very city of Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, and it's a terrible, terrible time, and a very confusing time. In addition, there were new doctrines that were beginning to creep into the church. Gnostic mysticism was coming in from the East. Roman philosophy was working and worming its way into the church as well. On top of that, you had a growing antagonism between the Roman culture and the Christians. And so they are living in this tension in this world that is struggling for them. And the writer of Hebrews writes to them in chapter 13 some very profound words, beginning in verse 6 of chapter 13. He says, "So we can confidently say, 'The Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man can do to me.' Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Do not be led away by diverse and strange teachings, for it is good for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by foods which have not benefited those devoted to them." It's a profound thought. I focused in on verse 7, where it talks about remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way. And literally that phrase, consider the outcome of their way, means to consider how they lived their life to the end, is another way of translating that. Consider how they lived their life up to the end. Understand how they lived their lives, and then imitate them in their life and in their faith. And that's what we learn from our Christian walk, is that we honor those who have gone before us, who have lived their lives in a way that makes Christ relevant in the world we live in. Christians would face all kinds of struggles in the next century to 2 centuries as they work their way through all kinds of conflict and difficulty and problems and doctrinal attempts to wreck the Christian faith. But they were firm and they came through. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they honored and respected the tradition of those who had come before. I hope you do that as well. I hope you remember those who paved the way for you in your Christian faith, especially those that have gone on to be with Christ. I hope you will remember them this day and honor their memory. And tomorrow on Remembrance Day or Memorial Day, I hope you'll take time to remember the men and women who have served our nation and died in service to our nation. Take time during the fun and the activities of the Memorial Day weekend to remember those who secured your freedom at the ultimate price. And if you know somebody who's serving in the military, tell them thank you, because they have honored you with their service. God bless. Have a wonderful day tomorrow, and have a wonderful memorial time with your families and with your friends. God bless. Take care.